That could be falsified. We can look in the historical record and say,
He
okay,
talking about the period of like the Macedonian Greeks and all of that. That's what he trying to say. I got you.
no. He started with a chronology, right? So let me read it again. It says the priests of Egypt began to keep written records between 4,000 and 3,000 BC, right? So he starts there. But more than two, but but more than 2,000 years later, the poems of Homer were still being circulated in the Greek city states by word of mouth. So he covers 2,000 years of history right there. So he's saying uh, around 4,000, 3,000 BCE, the Nile Valley already had writing, right? 2,000 years later, where's Homer from? Rome or Greece? He's Greece, right?
Homer, yeah. No,
Yeah.
actually,
So
I'm not sure. Don't give me a line.
that doesn't matter. He's saying, okay, the Africans, quote unquote, Nile Valley, right? Now that very well could have nothing even to do with us, right? So that's another component of the argument. Somebody could say, well, shit, West Africans didn't have writing. So are you saying the same thing about Europeans that you are about us? That's one part of the argument. But he's saying around 3,000, 4,000 BCE or so, Nile Valley Africans already had writing. And then 2,000 years after that, Rome and Greece or Europe, quote unquote, still didn't even have writing by that point. So he's giving you a chronology. So when he comes down to the Macedonian period, which is what 332 BCE, which is when Alexander starts doing his thing. He's coming down through the ages. Logic. Yeah, he's saying that they didn't have certain shit at certain times, and that's
Um,
not. Yeah, that could be confirmed or falsified.
okay. Yeah, I guess I mean he might have a point there. If that's what you're trying to say, I could see what point he's trying to make. It doesn't sound as crazy as like saying Europeans ain't do nothing. But I get you now.
That's what he's saying.
So that's what I thought he was saying. Sure, I think he's saying it right, but Haskell trying to say he's talking about the period of like before Alexander comes to Egypt. That I don't know how he getting that
No,
necessarily, but that's
Haskell basically saying, is he wrong? Like historically,
He said he
is he?
gave a date. He said the
Yeah.
pre-Neolithic. He said just before the Neolithic time.
Yeah, so he's asking, is John Henry Clark wrong for saying it if it's the truth?
Yeah, is it historically correct or not?
Right. That's what he asking.
He says so.
yeah.
He says so. So,
It
so
might
listen.
it might be if that's
Let me
the
read
period
it.
you're talking about.
Let
He
me
might.
ask Chef. Let me ask Chef then. So Chef, this sentence right here. He says shortly after 3000 BC, while the pharaohs were building the first pyramids, Europeans were creating nothing more distinguished than huge garbage heaps. What do you
I
make of that?
mean, compared to what was going on in Egypt, yeah, he probably is correct. You know
Right.
what I mean? The level of civilization that was in Europe at 3000 BC versus what was going on in the Nile Valley or in the Euphrates. You know what I mean? Yeah, they was behind the Euphrates and the Nile Valley technologically. I could agree with that. I think it's hyperbolic saying uh what's the name saying that they was trash heaps comparing now he could be talking about the ziggurats compared, they look like trash heaps now. Like you can't even distinguish them versus the pyramids and you dig what I'm saying, grand structures that was left behind in Egypt versus what was left behind in
Well,
Mesopotamia.
they would have been coming up when they. No, that would have been before the Dark Ages. My bad. My bad, Chef. Keep
Yeah,
going.
we in the BC. We in the BC time. So it depends on what he. But yeah, it could be historically accurate, but I think it will be hyperbolic. You know what I'm saying? I think he's just trying to make a point. I'm going back on me. Y'all can continue.
Yeah. Because even
You
here
know,
he
no,
says,
I think that's exactly what he was doing. Like, you know, it's always got to be a little bit of hyperbole in there. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, he
To kind
taking
of get
some
the
pot.
point
He
across. Yeah, you
he
want to take a
taking pot
shot.
shots. Yeah, he taking
I
pot
ain't
shots.
totally mad at it though. You know what I mean? Like I'm not like shit like that don't necessarily strike me as like pseudo, right? Um, he took a shot. I mean, who can be mad at taking a shot? You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, man. But um, like you just take all of that little with a grain of salt, I guess. You know what I'm saying? That's
What
kind
I
of the way I look
what
at
I would say, Corey, to argue
it.
against John Henry Clark is clearly from his tone of voice, he's saying these people not having, technological advancements or building or anything by that time. Clearly, he's given the impression that, they're basically remedial or aggressive or whatever. And it kind of begs the question, okay,
Yeah, he low key making the IQ argument, low key.
yeah, I was gonna say that, Fetty
I
Liar. So
think I
what
think
does
he's
that
more
say?
alluding to similar civilization. I think he was more alluding to how civilized they were
Right,
compared
right,
to
right.
Africans.
Now,
Not
if
not
we're
not
saying,
like remedial or nothing like
all right, so let's say that we're saying that they were uncivilized compared to the Nile Valley Africans, right? Then where was West Africa and Central Africa at that time? Like where we're from? Because we were around, right?
that.
You
Absolutely,
know what I'm
but
saying?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that
We
a
we
lot of
we
that
was
history
we was
wasn't
already
documented.
working with iron. No, some of it is. We was already working with iron. You know what
Oh,
I
about
mean?
Oh
And
yeah,
things
3000
yeah, in the
everything.
BC.
Neolithic, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and I think we already had our
Iron was used by us, but it was mostly in like the central Sudan
ceremony.
area. But yeah, it definitely was we definitely was working with iron, but they don't know if it was they still don't know who exactly started it. But we definitely got history of using iron, our own distinct way of using it for sure.
Around
yeah,
that
we got our
time,
own
3000
smelting technique.
3000 BC.
Yeah, I think so. Look it
Hmm.
up.
Yeah, like, yeah, we was making the terracottas and all that shit.
Yeah, because
Oh, so
they
that
remember we
means,
read that, Shepard, when they was in the Neolithic, we was still doing, and we was in the Iron Age. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
oh, so we was more advanced than them too. Damn.
Pause wise
No, no,
metallurgy and
no.
different things.
Well, they
We
was
didn't
saying
get
that we
far.
was less advanced because they was in the Neolithic and we was still in the Iron. You know what I mean? Like we just
No,
felt
no,
iron.
iron is more technical than
Than
lithic
stone.
is stone. Lithic
Right.
means stone, Corey. That means that
Oh,
they were
okay,
still
yeah,
in the Stone Age.
right. Well, I think the Neolithic, meaning like they was starting to add
No, it
farming
means it means
and
new Stone
power.
Age.
It
But yeah,
means
it
Yeah, it
stone.
just means like the new
Yeah.
version
the new
of
Stone Age is
stone.
saying they started developing those things in the new
Oh,
Stone Age, the
they was
farming and
cutting the stone a little bit better and shit.
Mm-hmm.
In the
Yeah,
Neolithic part, they had better techniques. Is that what y'all saying?
That's why them
yeah.
combos is dangerous because
I
most
always
races can
thought
flip that shit and
Neolithic.
say your ancestors ain't read or write
right. That's what I
compared
was
to
getting
other
at.
people.
That's what I was getting at, Fetty.
Nah,
That,
that's
Like,
that
what.
shit can be
Yeah,
that's why that
they
shit dangerous because a
misrepresent
nigga
that.
can flip that shit on you if you going around
right.
saying white people savage and nigga can flip that on you with
Yeah. That's
facts.
wild. Yeah.
That's what I
And
was
then
getting
trying
at.
to compare like isolated populations is it's kind of wild to me because like if it's advanced just because it's advanced there at that time don't mean that would be beneficial here at this time. You understand what I'm saying? Like so it's comparing apples and oranges really like looking at it. You know what I'm saying? Like, can we look at them and compare them and appreciate them? Yeah. But like comparing and saying like one was better or more advanced than the next, I just think that's kind of comparing apples and oranges.
So I mean, let me read another section. Let's see just how pseudo this forward is, because Brass been going in on Clark. You know what I'm saying? So here's another section. He says, because of the stubborn refusal of white scholars to read, and he puts scholars in quotations, by the way, to read books like Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James, published in 1954, African
Pseudo.
Origins, African Origins of the Major Western Religions by Dr.
Pseudo.
Joseph A.
Ben
Ben
Jacquin.
Jockanen,
Pseudo.
published in
Hey, Stolen
1970.
Legacy. Stolen Legacy was my first conscious book. That was my first conscious book ever. Stolen
Likewise,
Legacy.
likewise. That was mine too.
All right, so he says the destruction of black civilization, great issues of a race from 4500 BC to
Pseudo.
2000 AD by Chancellor Williams. Chancellor Williams is definitely not pseudo. Published in
Pseudo.
1974. Ages of Gold and Silver by John A. Jackson,
John D.
published in
Jackson.
1991. White scholarly pretenders
That's a
who
good
are
book.
often white scholarly
Ages of
pretenders who
Gold and
are
Silver.
often authorities on things they know little or nothing about are not aware of the early European intellectual dependency on North Africa and Western Asia. They are also not aware that most of the so called Greek philosophers not only studied in Egypt, but consulted Egyptian texts on a regular basis. According to Theophile Obenga in his work, The Pharaonic Origins of Greek Philosophy, published in 1990, the word philosophy is not of Greek origin. This European practice of attributing the achievements of other people to themselves started during the Greco Roman period and continued to this day. What y'all think of
So
that?
philosophy was a Wolof word then.
I don't know what Theophile Obenga argument is, all right. So how about the whole idea of European dependency on North Africa and Western Asia in the Greco-Roman period? Pseudo, kind of pseudo.
Wait, you reading from the actual book,
I
the
mean,
Iceland
he said
book?
dependency. I think that's a strong word, but I mean, I don't think nobody's in contention that those folks learned from those, those groups he just named. But dependency is I don't know, that might be a stretch for me.
How about the most of the so-called Greek philosophers not only studied in Egypt, but consulted Egyptian texts on a regular basis?
I don't see nothing wrong with that
But
neither.
most people would tell you they took it and actually put their remix on it. And
Added to it, right?
yeah, but in
Yeah.
reality, that is kind of like that. That indicates that when you go around and you take, again, it depends on their specific location. That's why I talk about like isolated populations and groups that was around where you could trade ideas. It seemed like they was just refining everybody's shit and creating their own little, you know what I mean?
Putting a spin on it.
I think
Yeah.
it's difficult to actually know because you also got niggas that's been caught lying about going to Egypt, right? Like there's even some of that going on. So all you could really tell is that Egypt is seen as prestigious in the Greek culture, but as far as how do you quantify what part of their philosophy comes from Egypt and comes from Greek, it's like you ain't gonna never do that. You know what I'm saying? Unless you see it word for word in Greek and on papyrus, like that would be the only way you would say that. But some of them motherfucking those Greek philosophers are straight up con men. Like I don't
So
know if y'all
you
know.
gotta know what Greece actually is. So a lot of times, when people like John Henry Clark and them make those type of statements, they're not being totally accurate. You dig what I'm saying? Because Greece is not just the Greek civilization is not just an island in the Mediterranean close to Europe. Their civilization went all the way into Anatolia, right? So
Yeah, that
Greece
shit was bad.
exists on both. Yeah, right. So that goes right into the Sassanid, which is the Persian Empire. So it was a lot of connections there already. Think about that. You dig what I'm saying? So when people try to separate Europe from Mesopotamia, that's kind of disingenuous because there was cultural continuity from the Sassanids all the way through um, the Mediterranean. So that's my
No,
beef.
he said that, chef. He said they depended on North Africa and Western Asia.
Yeah, but to say that they depended, Western Asia was a Greece was a part of that Western Asian uh civilization grid. You dig what I'm saying? That's
Even
not just
before,
you
even
can't
before,
separate it.
um, even before Alexander.
Yeah, even before Alexander, why you think they was fighting? You feel me? They had city states already in
Hmm.
Anatolia. You feel me? That was already under Greek dominance and back and forth. It was, you know what I mean? Y'all gotta look into that. But that's
Okay.
one way to separate Europe from and try to act like Europe is just something completely different from Western Asia, and that's not true. Especially Southern Europe, that's all you know. What I mean, they all together mixing, and you think what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're
Come on
saying.
now,
It's like one whole continuum. One
yeah.
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
what you're getting at.
Greece didn't just pop up out of nowhere with no. You think what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It don't work like that. You know, they act like Western Asia and then Europe and then Africa, all that they was just all separate
they
things.
were
They
their
wasn't.
own little separate, isolated. Yeah, I get it. I
It
feel
don't
it.
work like that. But that's how we look at it. We look at Europe, we look at Asia, and we look at Africa. And we don't realize that like that northern realm, you know what I mean, Africa with Western Asia, you know what I mean, and the Mediterranean, they was always in communication with each other. You know what I mean? So it wasn't no isolated thing like we see with World War One. You know what I mean? That's a new version of how we look at the world. I'm going back on mute. But keep cooking, Haskell. Keep reading. That's good.
All right, let's get some more. All right, he says the racism that plagues us today had its origins in the second rise of Europe in the 15th and 16th centuries. During this period that the Europeans refer to as their Middle Ages or Dark Ages, Europe had lost their previous skills in seafaring, and the concept of latitude, longitude, and latitude had been also lost from their memory. They came out of this period in history, according to Professor Leonard Jeffries of City College of New York, land poor, people poor, and resource poor. The European established the slave trade and used it to begin its economical recovery. After the Crusades and the famines and plagues that had arrested the attention of Europe for over 300 years, Europe's self concept was damaged. Since 711, the year of the African Arab conquest of Spain, Europe had been held at bay by what they referred to as the hated infidels. African and Arab armies in North Africa and in the Mediterranean area, and by the continuous rise of Islam. So, what y'all think about that part right there?
I don't agree with it, but it makes me want to read more because at least he's giving like a detailed description of his theory. So that's what makes it I guess interesting for me to further look into because he is giving detailed shit dealing with they lost they knowledge and navigation and shit like that and pointing to dates. Do I agree with it? No, but I'm starting to shoot him a little bit of bail because I mean during that time they didn't have certain tools. It's a difference between making a description like that versus making something outlandish and simplified, if that makes sense. I didn't know they were that descriptive as to specifically how they felt. So that's dope. I still think it's pseudo though, but
What do you make of the idea that because of the Dark Ages, right? Europe's self concept was damaged, is how he puts it. So he's basically forwarding the idea that they self esteem, their collective self esteem was kind of fucked up
what due to
around that
famine and
time.
shit like that? Is that what he said?
You said due to the Dark Ages. Let me read it again. So it says after the Crusades, so that was war, and the famines and plagues that had arrested the attention of Europe for over 300 years, Europe's self concept was damaged.
That's a sweeping statement to make. But I see what he's saying. But he should have gave I would have, if I was during that time or living during that time, I would have told him to at least make an example of a prominent European descendant that felt that way and created a movement or whatever with that same ideology that he had, and he implemented that on a group of people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Another thing I would say too is going along with what you're saying as far as it being sweeping, a lot of that knowledge that was quote unquote lost, a lot of it was being hoarded by European elite, especially the church. So like, because if you think about it, by the time of the 1400s when Portugal started like going to West Africa and doing all of that stuff, you
Like
couldn't.
what is it? Spanish Inquisition? What is it called? Iberia or some shit like that? 1492 or some shit like that.
Oh yeah, that's 1492 is when they kicked the Moors out or whatever. And then shortly after that is when they start. But even before that, the Portuguese, because the Portuguese was navigating like West Africa in the mid 1400s.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But the point that the basic point I'm making is going towards what Chef was saying is that the language is a little too cut and dry, right? So he kind of paints a picture of Europe being in the dark for 300 years, and then they get contact with the Africans and they kind of reemerge. But
Right.
you can't be completely devoid of knowledge as an entire group for that period of time. And then when the 1400 come, the Portuguese have ships. You know what I'm saying? They like one
Right,
of the
right, right.
leading. You get what I'm saying? That knowledge had to have been there even through that period. And from what I know of the Dark Ages, a lot of what caused it, along with the famines and the wars and all of that stuff, was a lot of the clergy,
There was
right?
a
Kind
power
of,
dynamic at play.
yeah, they didn't democratize knowledge. You know what I'm saying? They
Yeah.
hoarded it for themselves, and that has a lot to do with their aggression during that period, along with the wars and the famine and all of
He
that
could
type
have
of
he
shit.
could have simplified it by saying like lay people. Like he could have categorized it better, like describing like the class system or hierarchical system within Europe at that time, to go in with to what you were saying, like how specific people used it as a way to, because like you said, especially during that time, knowledge can be you know the difference between your status and somebody else's. So I can see how motherfuckers was doing that during that time. So, but yeah, he would just have to give more details of his shit. I don't agree with it, but
All right, so say he says Europe began to break out of this bind in the 1400s with the port assault on the city of Creta in Morocco. In 1415 and again in 1455, when in settling an argument between Portugal and Spain, the Pope authorized Portugal and Spain to reduce to servitude all infidel people. Most of the declared infidels were Africans and Asians. This was the official rationale for the Atlantic slave trade. During this period, Europeans not only began to colonize most of the world, they also colonized information about the world. They colonized the Bible, they colonized all complementary images that non European held of themselves. The most effective of all of these colonized images was their colonization of the image of God. Through missionaries, adventurers, freebooters, and slave traders, they began to propagate the concept that God favored them over other people. They were saying, in essence, that all Europeans were the chosen people of God. Often in their teaching about God, they ran into a contradiction. They taught of a God who was king and loved mankind, who was no respecter of kith or kin. By pretending that God favored them over other people, they had made God into a bigot. They had made God ungodly. Most of the non-Europeans had misconceptions about the Europeans' relationship to Christianity then, and have the some of the same misconceptions now. Europeans have a tendency of proclaiming ideas to the world that they do not believe themselves and would not dare to live by if they were going to hold power over most of the people of the world. The war on non European culture that had been going on before the emergence of Europe now continued, mainly under European control. The Europeans were now telling their victims that the world waited in darkness for them to bring the light, when in actuality, everywhere the European went outside of Europe, he put out the light of his victims' culture, spirituality, and cultured way of life. Not only did he not understand their culture, he had no intention of understanding their culture. Europeans declared war on the structure of every society they invaded or were welcomed into as visitors. Many societies that the European pretended to civilize would have been better off had the Europeans left them alone.
Hmm.
He making some dangerous statements, boy. It's like he's inviting a group of races to like create their own narrative and rhetoric that can flip. Yeah, that's dangerous, bro. But again, I get, like Corey said, I get why he's presenting it that way. Because if he was more detailed, it'll lose like the whole intent of why the reader should read it in the first place. So you got to present it in like a um fictional movie type way. So I understand why he did it.
So, which part of that you kind of found to be kind of hyperbolic?
Now, you can't present it as a fictional movie and then whole time say you're about correcting history and he's the most stringent when it comes to how accurate the stuff that he says and all that. You can't do both of them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Somewhere
that's true.
there's a contradiction.
Because I mean, like what he's saying insofar as like, when they started going around the world, I want to say, and I could be wrong, they were like the first conquerors in history that I know of. I don't know if Kong and them did the same
Who
thing, huh?
who were the first conquerors in history?
No, no, no. I was gonna say this time period when they went around conquering, like so starting around the back part of the 15th century,
Hmm.
they're the first conquerors that I know of where not only did they colonize areas, because obviously colonization had been going on all throughout Europe, human history everywhere, right? But this was like the first instance that I know of where they would like try to like erase people culture and impose like their cultural norms on people and their spirituality and that type of shit. You know what I'm saying? As far as I know,
No, they wasn't. That was the whole thing with Greece and Rome. They felt as though they was bringing civilization to the world. You dig what I'm
right.
saying? So you know, they felt as
The
though
same
their
way
way of
we
life
thought we was
and
bringing civilization to them hunter gatherers before the Bantu expansion. The same shit.
hmm
They had to
I
follow
mean, if
our
you
way
feel
of
like,
living.
yeah, if you think you got a better way, you dig what I'm saying? A living for humanity, the same thing Hitler and them believe. You dig what I'm saying? So it's common. We'll continue.
Is there any other instances like that type of thing written? Because the Bantu thing is a lot of
You
it's a
gave
lot
Bro,
of
look,
different
them.
things.
bro, just
America
just
do it too. We try
look
to
at the
we
landscape of
spread
Africa before the
democracy
Bantu
around the
expansion.
world.
We
We go
swept
around the
through
whole
that
world
shit.
spreading democracy. We do the same shit.
Yeah, them Europeans, Corey.
Bro,
That's descendants of Europe.
we put pygmies in compounds, bro, and made them live amongst themselves while also adhering to our West African culture, bro. It's the same shit. It's just it's a little different based off, the way at which you do it. I think that's what you're saying. But groups have always been looking at another group, scoping them out, and saying, "Oh, they food. and we can use them for our purpose. That's devoid of race or anything like that.
Okay. I gotta look into that stuff more because I always hear about that and them cannibalizing the hunter gatherers and all that.
Bro,
But I hear
it's
other
wild shit going on. But like you said, you can't apply that fully to, because there are some Bantus that that can live peacefully. So you can't apply a sweeping statement like that. But there are activism and certain movements in Africa to advocate for hunter gatherers. And the lasting effects that the Bantu expansion had. Because look at haplogroup A and B. That was the paternal haplogroups in Africa. What we basically did was kill most of the men and took pygmy women, and that created asymmetrical gene flow. So we was like, no, Bantu men, hunter gatherer men can't take our women. That's what they basically said, and you can see it in our genetics. African Americans got maternal, some percentage of maternal hunter gatherer pygmy ancestry.
Are y'all talking about when a civilization goes on a quote unquote civilizing mission when they try
yeah.
to? Okay, so yeah, there's plenty of examples of that in human history. Somebody brought up Rome. That's a good one. Even the Chinese, they have like a civilized dynasty, and then they have a barbaric dynasty, and they try to um, the civilized dynasty kind of are at the center of their world civilization, and they go around trying to uh, upgrade or civilize these other barbaric nations. We even see that within like how Christianity entered Europe, and like how all the European countries, while they may have not normally been in agreement with each other, because they were going through the process of getting Christianized by the Catholic Church, converted. Um, a lot of those wars, like Charlemagne and the Saxons and things like that, baptism was like the main focal point for converting a lot of people. They wouldn't be considered civil unless they went through baptizing, uh, which no question within the Christian context will lead them as both saved via salvation and then of course civilized. Even in Islam, we see that
Yeah,
as well.
I was just gonna say you could say it with Islam too.
Yep. In Islam, the caliphates pretty much they validate spreading Islam as something that is considered spiritual, but also it's a civil thing. So, like humans have always been doing this since the beginning of time. This isn't anything new. Even when Britain goes around from country to country to country, we call it whitewashing, but in their eyes, it's them civilizing nations that were uncivil to them. It's like a moral justification for power.
Because I guess it's all nuance because I was gonna say even with the Muslim conquest, right? For the most part, like let's say when they took over North Africa, right? For the most part, they just wanted the Berbers to profess their fidelity to Allah, right? But they didn't do like a great deal in terms of structurally augmenting the society. You know what I'm saying? To the point where even today, a lot of the traditions that those peoples have, they still practice it. I think I think that's what John Henry Clark was getting at. Like he's saying that, the Europeans at that time, like they were kind of the first to where they would not only take over an area, like they would like look to completely just rebuild the people, like, you know what I'm saying? Take all their norms away and their spiritual beliefs and everything and reformat them.
Kind of like how we did here in America with the whole like manifest destiny thing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you saying yeah, but those are that's an extension of the British Empire, though, right? That did that.
No, I'm talking about here in like the 19th century, I think, when like we're trying to make like natives and Mexicans, uh, you know, be more democratic, and so a lot of them end up becoming Christians and walking and progressing to being American citizens. And so, because of that, America grew westward, um, justifying justifying it as like a divine mission or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, it's the same concept.
Same concept. But yeah, man, I really wanted to read from the book because you know what I'm saying? I think people have ideas of about what Henry Clark is or what he said, and I don't think it's necessarily as wild as people would imagine. You know what I'm saying? You could definitely
Read it, read
say,
it, read it. You doing good. Read it.
okay, all right, hold on where I'm at. There's a need to look at. So we could agree so far, some of it is hyperbolic, but nothing where he just wilding.
No, he's couching everything historically. You can argue with his viewpoint, but he is couching it historically.
All right, so he's giving some when De La Casas came to the Americas and he encountered the Indians. I think most of us know about that stuff, right? De La Casas's diary, and he said, "In all of the universe of humanity, these people are the most guileless, meaning they're like honest, don't use trickery, the most devoid of wickedness and duplicity, the most obedient and faithful to their native masters and to the Spanish Christians whom they serve. They are by nature the most humble, patient, and peaceable, holding no grudges, free from embroilments, neither excitable nor quarrelsome. These people are the most devoid of rancors, hatred, or desire for vengeance of any people in the world. And because they are so weak and complacent, they are less able to endure heavy labor and soon die of no matter what malady. The sons of nobles among us, brought up in the enjoyments of life's refinements, are no more delicate than are these Indians, even those among them who are of the lowest rank of laborers. They are also poor people, for they not only possess little, but have no desire to possess worldly goods. For this reason, they are not arrogant, embittered, or greedy. If Father Delacat if Father de la Casas's account of the people on Hispaniola is true, and I believe it is, what excuse can the Spanish Christians offer for their wholesale torture and murder? De las Casas goes into a detailed description of the continuous annihilation of the Indians in the occupation and destruction of the civilizations of Mexico. Further in his book, he describes the occupation of the Indies in this manner. They were very clean in their persons, with alert, intelligent minds, docile and open to doctrine, very apt to receive our holy Catholic faith and to be endowed with virtuous customs and to behave in a godly fashion. Yet into this sheepfold, into this land of weak outcasts, there came some Spaniards who immediately behaved like ravening wild beasts, wolves, tigers, or lions that had been starved for many days. And Spaniards have behaved in no other way during the past 40 years down to the present time, for they are still acting like ravening beasts, killing, terrorizing, afflicting, torturing, and destroying the native peoples, doing all this with the strangest and most varied new methods of cruelty never seen or heard of before, and to such a degree that this island of Hispaniola, once so populous, having a population that I estimated to be more than 3 million, was now a population of barely 200 persons. The island of Cuba is nearly as long as the distance between Valladolid and Rome. It is now almost completely depopulated. San Juan and Jamaica are two of the largest and most productive and attractive islands. Both are now deserted and devastated. On the northern side of Cuba and Hispaniola lie the neighboring Lucayos, comprising more than 60 islands, including those called Gigantes, besides numerous other islands, some small, some large. The least felicitous of them were more fertile and beautiful than the gardens of the King of Seville. They have the healthiest lands in the world, where live more than 500,000 souls. They are now deserted, inhabited by not a single living creature. All the people were slain or died after being taken into captivity and brought to the island of Hispaniola to be sold as slaves. So, damn, if you think about it, a lot of the shit that's being forwarded in this book, this idea that Europeans are especially brutal and bloodthirsty, a lot of what De La Casas is, he's saying that shit. He's saying like before that period or even after, you never saw that type of brutality for sport. Like the shit was just gratuitous. Like he said, they was
Yeah,
coming up with new ways to torture motherfucker. Like how can we, you know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
So
Like
let's think about that. Let's look at motive now. You feel me? Now, De La Casas had he developed a soft spot in his heart for the natives. Not saying that they wasn't um, being brutalized and depopulated, but I think he's painting a more grimmer picture than what it actually was because he wanted that torture or that pillaging to stop on those people. So he was making a plea to the church, you know what I mean, to stop it. So I think he was being a little, I think he put a little bit too much dip on that chip. You dig what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? But go ahead. You doing good.
hold on, I wanted to get to this one part because that really stuck out to me. No other way. The last 40 years, torturing, doing all of this, and to such a degree, and now almost completely
Because
500,000
that same De La Casas, he vouched for the for the importation of Africans to do
Africans.
the manual
Right.
labor, right? So he wanted to. He had found some type of fondness for the natives, and he felt as though that they couldn't handle the burden that colonization
Putting
was
on them.
putting on them. You dig what I'm saying? So he felt as though it was another group of people that could handle the burden, and they was already agriculturalists. You dig what I'm saying? Where the majority of those people wasn't agriculturalists, so they couldn't even handle that type of work. But the Africans, we was already, you dig what I'm saying, agriculturalists, right? And had similar customs as the Europeans. And we were from that same neck of the woods as Europeans, so we could handle their diseases and stuff also. So the place. But go ahead.
Math. Okay, here it is. So he says Spaniards have behaved in no other way during the past 40 years down to the present time, for they are still acting like ravening beasts, killing, terrorizing, afflicting, torturing and destroying the native peoples, doing all this with the strangest and most varied new methods of cruelty. That part stuck out to me. So Chef thinks Buddy just he juicing it up, but I don't know because a lot of that shit is in the historical record, and then when you look at slavery, you see it again. You know what I'm saying? Doing shit like burying motherfuckers alive and letting ants eat them and tying a motherfucker up and a pregnant woman up and slashing her stomach and you know what I'm saying? Like that shit is in the historical record. So I don't know who all on the panel, but what do y'all make of this idea that Europeans have affinity for gratuitous violence, like sport, violence as sport? Is that some new shit? Or has that been well, yeah, torturing shit been in the historical record, but is he going too far when he says these motherfuckers took it to a whole nother level?
What are you comparing it to? How much about violence in Africa do you know?
I know some. I know some. Um, you right about that though. I probably would have to read more into that type of shit because I do know accounts of I mean during the Bantu they claim they're cannibalizing people, right? Shit like that. So yeah, I don't know. How would you measure that?
Yeah,
So what you
I don't know if that's a I don't know. Like, I think that we already got so much to be mad at, and then to maybe like emphasize the brutality of it. I feel like that doesn't really help. You know what I'm saying? I think there's already so much there that you can frown at or point towards about how wrong it is. Because once you talk about the brutality of it, like you're almost saying as if black people aren't capable of it too. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't believe that to be true, and I think that that's where the argument would end up somewhere in that. You know what I'm saying? As if that there something about them, is just more.
Different.
You're almost talking about genes at that point. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of steer clear of that kind
I,
of shit.
I agree with logic there. I think to say that a particular like murders or killings is more worse or anything like that than others is like the ways of dying of course differ, but using extreme or worse as a difference between how one does it versus another isn't necessarily something I would pick or choose. There have been historical violence and genocides and just mass violence via rebellions and just all types of stuff that has happened that would be on that list, and a lot of them are in Africa. But I just wouldn't put it in a scale to rank one versus another. They're all fucked up,
right,
like
right.
morally.
To me, honestly, forcing people to build a pyramid is one of the most brutal things I can possibly think of. To
You
be
think
honest
they were
with
forced?
you, maybe forced isn't the right word, but I mean, I don't think they had a lot of options.
You don't
It
think
was
they were
like
willing?
either
You don't
it
think
was
that
like
they
either
saw
that
value
or be a
in doing something
farmer or
like that?
something. You know what I'm saying? Like they needed a job, so it's like you can be a quarry man, you can be a farmer, but you can't be an artisan, right? Like you can't just say, "Hey, I want to be." I want to write papyrus. No, they don't. You can't do that. So their options are super limited. So I'm not going to say exactly forced, but he it's not like he could just, like I said, he can't just become a poet. That's not an option.
In
Oh,
fact, even for some, real quick, in fact, even for someone to be chosen to work on something like pyramid building would have felt significant compared to regular laborers of the day. We have to keep that in mind. Mind you, that they use a lot of
You
those.
saying
They
like
use
by? Are you saying like by pay?
sorry, say it again.
Are you judging that based on how much he got paid?
No. I'm not even talking about pay. I'm just talking about value as far as working on a project versus just regular manual labor with the intent to, make whatever amount of money or whatever you would get to barter or trade for it. That there's a complete contrast versus like being chosen to work on a project for your nation.
I'm not sure what you're saying, but it sounds like you're saying people who were doing manual labor had a high rank in society. Is that what you're
They
saying?
they were a part of high rank of society for to be chosen for that particular project. Absolutely, they would have had to be.
I got you. I don't see it that way. I
We
feel like
can't
they
we
they
can't
might they might have
apply
lived in specific areas. They might have been paid based on the type of work that they do, but they're dying at high rates.
we can't apply the understanding of slave and slave work with the lens from a modern perspective. We have to understand that at that time, like these people are, these people are descendants of those who came from the caves in their region. So, there's a sense of pride to be able to use what they formerly called home in those mountains, to be able to be responsible to build something that they actually believed in. Those people believed in the deities, whether people accept it or not. They did. If they didn't, a lot wouldn't have been what it was. So we can't apply the same lens we have from a modern sense to all the way, damn near 5,000, 6,000 years ago. You can't do that.
Let's say we
Yeah, I
take
don't want. I
logic.
don't know if I can play that game, because either they value the life or not. They valued the
Let's
lives or they didn't. Right?
but
Either
let's
they
say we,
stopped doing the human sacrifice rituals because they valued the people's lives, or it's because they didn't. It's something about
Um,
that
so, so that's
their
the
the
difference. Some
mass
people's
deaths
lives,
that don't bother them, and
some
whether
people,
it's their belief that lead them there or whatever leads them to that conclusion, like that's
Mhm.
still kind of
You
it's
know, man,
still looking at it.
there's no
I'm
distinction.
judging that
some
There,
people's
to
there's
the
lives
no
are
other thing.
valued. Some people's lives are valued. Others were buried in the sand. So it's levels to it. So we
so
just
so
can't apply one.
Right. So you can't tell me that the people who are being buried in the sand have a high place in society. That doesn't even
They
make
didn't.
sense.
They didn't. That's why they were buried there.
so for logic, there's no distinction between, let's say, the elite in society using people, for utility, or driven by religion, and then in the course of that, those people not having the easiest lives, versus a completely defenseless, docile people being tortured and murdered for sport. Remember, we going by, if what De La Casas is saying, right? This isn't during the course of war. So like when you think about like what the Dahomey and the Oyo had going on, right? The Oyo first had the Dahomey under like indentured servitude, and they did do like atrocities against them and all of that type of shit, right? Particularly the POWs, right? And then once the homie got their strength up, you know, there was some retribution, a lot of retribution, and a lot of it was very, very violent, very ugly. And the homie to this day still has that reputation for being like this kind of murderous type of kingdom and da da da. But what's left out of the story is a lot of it was because of reprisal, right? But for me, logic might feel different. From a human perspective, I could see a person getting done a certain way and retaliating or getting get back. It makes sense to me on a human level, right? Even though it's still just as evil, just as wicked, shouldn't happen. But I could wrap my mind around it. Like I could say, okay, I see why you did that. I get it, right? What De La Casas is writing in this journal, if we taking it at face value, is a bunch of defenseless people with really no weapons. They docile as fuck. They take your religion on. You say, hey, believe in this God. They're like, okay. Um, give me this arrow you got or whatever. All right, here you go. Take it. Right? This according to him. He's saying the motherfuckers that give you the shirt off their back. They not looking for no smoke. Right? And he's saying these Spaniards was coming up with new ways to torture these motherfuckers every day, the same way how you would up the level of difficulty on a video game just for the fuck. To me, I look at them two things. One is infinitely more disgusting than the other, but that's just me.
No, I get what you're saying, and I think that people is disgusting. Like I think that you can see. I don't know what specific example, but if all humans are technically the same, like there should be multiple examples on both continents of people behaving that way. Like it's not something that would be specific to like their skin color. It would be something that you would see among humans. You get what I'm saying? I think that you just get some people who be more aggressive and some people who less, but like I don't think that. But I'm also working within like I feel like it's safe to say that you shouldn't see that sort of variation, right? Like I understand it makes sense to be looking for it, maybe based on what you're seeing, but based on like all humans being the same, you should see it like in both directions. You know what I'm saying? Now, whether the African slave trade was uniquely brutal or not doesn't mean white people behave as a group outside of like human behavior. They're humans.
Mm, mm. I don't know. I probably I gotta look into the historical
Well,
record.
what? Well, let's flush that out, right? So what if you can say that? Okay,
Where
even
do we
though that
go
would
from,
be
man?
taking the Earthman Inheritance book at face value as evidence, right? Let's say that you could identify that white people are inherently more aggressive and more
Right.
brutal, right? What then would you proceed?
Do
Like,
with that
how would
information
that aid you? Like, how would you use that, right? Like, that's the question. Does
on a
that now
personal level?
justify you to be more brutal? Like, like what's the mindset that you're looking for to take out of that? But go ahead.
Mhm. I mean, I don't know if you need to necessarily do anything with that other than take it for for what it is. Um, Maybe going forward, like for example, let me give you a real world example of something that I would never do based on what I've taken from history, right? So like when I hear like in the news, for example, I hear like a woman went on, or even a man went on a camping expedition with a bunch of Germanic descended people, right? And the person who went with them was the only African descended person. For me, knowing what I know of history, that would impact how I behave because I would never, under no circumstances, go anywhere with a group of those people where I'm the only person like me. Not doing it because of.
Let me try to get an even more straight up answer out of you, right? Let's say you into it with a nigga, right?
Mhm.
And the nigga that you into it with, you know that he got a history of being more brutal than other niggas, right? How
Right.
would you proceed with this scenario, knowing that there's a chance that this nigga is brutal, right?
Mhm.
What does that tell you to do as far as handling the situation?
Oh, I see where you're going. Like you gonna have to beat him to the punch. Like you gonna be more
It's
willing.
certainly not suggesting that there's a peaceful way around this. Is
Yeah, that I could agree with that takeaway. I could
as a
agree with
matter of
that.
fact, it's basically suggesting that there's no peaceful way around that shit, right?
I could agree with that. I could
See,
agree with that.
that's what I feel like you maybe failing to acknowledge in that whole thing. So just a couple seconds of letting you flush it out. So now that you've assumed that position, right, of white people need to be dealt with violently, like so now what you finna do? What does voting do?
Well, I would
It
say
don't
on the
mean what
face.
does getting a better job do? See what I'm saying?
Well, that's on the micro level, right? So like me walking around living my daily life, I'm not gonna go to the deli and look at Chad any different on an individual level, or feel like I need to enact violence against him or get him before he gets me, right? But what I would say is like on a macro level, like if you look at how France to this day still interacts with West Africa, like in my opinion, I don't see any way out, any resolution of that outside of what you're talking about. Because they still relate to those people the same way as them people did in the 1400s. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, you don't have chattel slavery going on, but it's the same mindset. Like neocolonialism.
Why do you feel the need to be concerned about what's happening in Chad?
Why do I feel the need to be concerned about what's going on? Where?
You said in Chad,
No, no, no. I said West Africa. West Africa. I said
in,
how.
in West Africa, right? So you were saying that there's no hope for them, right? So like, why are you trying to figure out a plan for them people over
I'm
there?
I'm not. I'm not trying to figure out a plan for them. I'm saying I would cite that as an example, right, of a modern day example of where it would go towards what you're speaking about. The idea that these people are like so intrinsically depraved or whatever that there is no resolution on that level outside of taking it to that level. I'm citing that as something to back up that idea. Not that I'm trying to fix nobody's shit or none of that.
Okay, so based on that, right? So watch this, right? Do you feel like that's the level that you ready to take it to?
Individually,
Yeah.
with who? With Chad in the that work in the Publix deli?
Hey,
I'm
How
gonna
did
I
say
y'all
heard
get to
him talk
that?
about the country.
If
I heard him say West Africa, and then I said Chad.
yeah, but if he's
No,
reading John Henry Clark forward, about the historical, um, I guess John Henry Clark is citing historical things to back up his Michael Bradley point that there is a hyper violent um way that Europeans is dealing with other non-whites. You dig what I'm saying?
nah, I think I'm getting to a point that maybe I was just going to explain once I got there. So I was asking him if he was on that wartime shit, right? Because that's what the biological conclusion brings you to is that there's no peaceful solution, right? We agreed there,
We ain't
right?
on the
So
solution yet, is we? We
no,
still
no,
trying
no.
to
So
figure out this John Henry Clark on some bullshit. You know what I mean? And
okay,
can we iron out some of the shit that John Henry Clark is saying? Not
I
on whether
definitely
we
jumped ahead
agree
of
with
you.
John Henry Clark. And so what's going on now? My bad.
I think logic kind of gets the
Yeah,
inclination.
I done jumped
Nah,
ahead. I done jumped ahead of that a little bit because I done derailed it because I
Yeah,
know
because
what
you
I
already ready
heard.
to fight. You ready to fight.
yeah, you ready? You ready to
I
get
don't
it
got
in?
my
Yeah,
fist
you want
rolled
to tell
up at
niggas
half though.
excuse me for easy.
It ain't even that hassle. It was the point. It was the point that I hear that he agrees, and you know what
Right.
I'm saying, with the
I
whole
think you
white
know what
people
it
with
is.
biological thing, right? So I'm taking him down the roads of what that
What's the
means, right? So
logical?
that means that there's no peaceful solution. You'll never find a peaceful
You may never
solution
know though,
because
Logic.
they
They may have addressed it
biologically
in the book.
wired to be
You never know.
aggressive, right? Just and then so my last question was he on that wartime to have to deal with somebody who's biologically more aggressive, right? So I gave him another scenario. So let's say if you into it with a nigga and you know that this nigga got a reputation for being more brutal than other niggas, right? You're not gonna handle this nigga like hey man, let me dapper you up, man. I don't mean that shit. You know what I'm saying? That's not gonna be how you handle it, nigga. You into like that? You know what I'm saying? So of course, the answer is going to be no. He's not on that wartime shit. So I was just going to end my point by saying, well, that means that you saying all of that shit just to psych your ass out. Like you done psyched yourself out of doing anything if you're not on the wartime shit that the biological premise would lead you to.
Okay. All right.
You
So
understand? Well, I said,
I know I heard you. I'm just trying to figure this is about me personally and what I'm ready to.
nah, it was about you agreeing with the biological part of them being more aggressive. It was about that part. That's what we're talking.
Yeah, you're saying the logical conclusion is if I buy into it, then that must mean that I got to be on wartime with anybody who is in that group. That's what I'm
I mean,
saying.
if
We
you're
kind of
going against them, I mean, how else would you deal with that? You certainly can't. You certainly can't trust to have a peace treaty with somebody who's has a bad reputation like that, right?
yeah. There's historical backative for that too. Like they pretty much violate every treaty they make. And that's in the historical record. Like they don't give a fuck about no treaty. So I mean, to
Right.
boil it
So,
down,
so
you
that's what I'm
basically
saying.
asking me.
It would only leave you with violence as far as what you would do. Either you be subordinate or you become violent. There's only two options there.
Yeah, that's why I said on the macro level. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I say there's something to that logic. Now, if you're asking me, I think what you're getting at is if me, Haskell, if I'm personally about that. Is that what you're asking? You want to know about me personally
Yes.
as a
Yes.
human?
You personally. Are you personally ready for the fight? You got your fist balled up for real.
No, right now I'm just sitting down on the phone. So I think I'd have to say no at this moment.
Okay, okay. But you do feel like that there is some kind of biological difference when it comes to how violent white people are.
I think there's something to it. Now, does that mean that every so-called white person is just irredeemably depraved? No, I don't think that. No. I look at it more in a collectivist sense. You know what I'm saying? How
And
groups
and,
how
and do
groups
you and
relate
you
to the
also realize when it comes to like how that works is that aggressive people like typically win. Just
well,
the
yeah.
odds just play out in their favor.
I mean the last couple thousand years definitely would bear that out. I
So
can't I can't
so
fight you on
so
that.
so they would be winners not by happenstance or like the circumstances later. They winners because biologically they winners, right? You see where the
Well, the
rabbit hole go?
argument is
Yeah, actually,
biological
yeah, that is an
more.
interesting point. Yeah, because you kind of
Yeah.
upholding superiority and you don't even realize it. You calling them because again, if you change the definition and metrics of what like you say, dominance or being aggressive, especially when you talk about groups of people, if one conquer the other, and that's the metric that John Henry Clark is going by, he's kind of saying that we inferior.
This is
What?
by whatever.
I ain't saying that.
I know where
He
you're
ain't.
going. No,
He's
no, no,
not
no, no.
saying
Let
that,
me
That,
read.
Fetty.
No. Let me
Now that,
read what
now,
no.
how
Hold
did
on,
I
hold on,
Fetty,
hold
think
on, hold
Fetty
on.
brought
that?
his
I'm going
own
off the
Let him
conclusion
talk.
analogy.
into it.
Hold
You
on. I'm
done
going off the
okay,
analogy.
Let
okay,
him
okay. You
talk.
done
Let him talk.
reconfused everybody,
Hold on,
brother.
no. Let me make my point. I'm saying I'm giving the analogy of if you're gonna say a group is implementing this savage way, right? And the point that Logic was making that if you're gonna say that is a metric of being better, or you're gonna use that as a metric to say a group is better, or more dominant, or more aggressive, you playing a dangerous game. That's all I was saying. Because if you do that, you're gonna have to really, again, racists will be able to use that against you. So every talking point that Henry Clark is making, a racist could use a historical context, mix it in their way to apply the same thing to us. That's what I was saying. So you got to be careful as to what you label other people, because if you say that these again people are aggressive, dominant, or whatever, and you on the losing end, and you on the losing end of that, like Logic saying, you only really got two choices if you talking from that standpoint. It's either live in Rome and do as the Romans do, or you gonna apply force. So I say that's what really puts
No.
you in that.
You know
Uh,
what? I'll say this. The force is only one part of it, right? I'd say, at least by the historical record, what precedes the force most of the times is guile and trickery, right? Because in Delacosta's account, a big part of the thing that he kept emphasizing with the Jews was that they were guileless, right? They had no idea of trickery or duplicity and that type of stuff. And we see it with a lot of the early West Africans interactions with Europeans, right? When they would send the missionaries and stuff like that. So beyond just the violent part of it, there's a cerebral aspect to it too, and an aspect where of not being so trusting. You know what I'm saying? A lot of them people got fucked over. The violence came after, in a lot of instances, them being trusted and getting lulled to sleep. So that's a component of it too, not just the violence.
yeah, I got
You know what I'm
I don't
saying?
know what you're going at, because if you're talking about trust, like you don't even trust all the black people around you. Like even that isn't a lesson for who do I trust and who don't I trust. I'm supposed to like everybody I encounter. They need to earn my trust, no matter what color.
Now I feel that.
Group wise. Yeah, but y'all keep going back to individual. Um, and I think John Henry Clark falls wise groups and historically, use the historical record to to drive his point home. But I was working, right? So as we was going through the towns, right, he had got to the 1500s, right? Um and we already went through the Greco-Roman period. We went through the early Neolithic period.
You there, Chef? He breaking up. Yeah. Damn. All right, let's continue. So it says racism, with its accompanying fear and frustration, was the cohesive force that held the plantation system together. It created a new way of life for the European and the Caribbean islands and the Americans over in the Caribbean islands and the Americans over and above any amount of creature. You there, Chef? You was breaking up. You was breaking up bad. Just so you know, we ain't heard nothing you said for the last about minute and a half.
Yeah, you got to come out and come back in, bro.
All right, so it says racism with its accompanying fear and frustration was the cohesive force that held the plantation system together. It created a new way of life for the European and the Caribbean islands and the Americas over and above any amount of creature comfort they could have enjoyed in Europe at the same time in history. The Europeans who were successful in Europe generally stayed in Europe. What was referred to as the New World was brought into being by a large number of people who were failures at home. Breaking up, Chef. It was once said that Europe dumped its human garbage can into the New World. In spite of some exaggeration, there is some truth in this statement. Many of these Europeans felt called upon to make non Europeans feel inferior so that they could convince themselves that they were a superior people. The physical resistance against European dominance and the need and greed that influenced their attitude and the personality started in a formal way early in the 18th century. In Africa, there were anti colonial revolts. The Africans were fighting to regain what slavery and colonialism had taken away. In the Caribbean islands and in South America, the Africans on a different geography and under different circumstances were fighting for basically the same thing. There are 250 recorded slave revolts in the United States alone. The people of Asia had been reacting against the occupation and domination almost from the beginning of the European presence in their country. They had a they had a different landmass to deal with and a different political situation, but they were fighting against the same thing. Early in the 20th century, the world began to witness the military rise of modern Japan. In the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, the Japanese were strong enough to match their military power against a major European nation and win. Racism against Asians, although with some variations, was radically different from racism against people of African descent and was spreading worldwide with the stereotyping of Asians, mainly Chinese, in early movies, while the cry against the yellow peril was directed against the Japanese after the Russo-Japanese War. It was generally directed against all Asians. This matter is reflected in great detail in the book The Revolt of Asia by Upton Closey, published in 1927. So you back, Chef?
He dropped out.
All right, so it says one of the comments worth repeating here is having witnessed the wide sweeping reverse swing of the pendulum against white dominance in Asia today, especially as shown in the revolt in China, it is now time to turn back from the present, surcharged with the motion of impending and fundamental change to examine. First, the broad context between the races, which culminated in the white man's world, and second, the successive steps which have recently brought his supremacy of the verge of collapse. The one question upon which the human creature is perhaps even more ignorant than where he is going is where he came from. We are almost totally ignorant as yet of even the meaning of race. Differentiations into racial stocks are approximate and uncertain. The one principle on which all ethnologists seem to agree is that any people, wherever found, must certainly have come from somewhere else. Upton Closey states further in his book about the origin and the end of the Yellow Peril. This final great eruption of the barbarian push flaring westward through Russia into Central Europe, as well as driving southward upon China, was dramatically enough What abruptly awakened self-centered Europe to the existence of the other half of the world? The military machine perfected by Genghis Khan swept through feudal Russia and as far as Vienna. No resistance offered could check it. Not the chivalry of Europe, but the decision of the Mongol commander to go home and attend the funeral of the dead Khan saved Christendom from the same iron heel which left such terrible scars of oppression on the soul of the Slav. This was the origin of the Yellow Peril scare, a fright which now seems almost a congenital instinct in the West.
You read a lot there. What was your take on that?
Yeah, so basically he was reading from this Chinese, I think it was a Chinese author he said he was, Upton. Hold on. The Revolt of Asia. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's basically just explaining current like European uh, attitudes towards Asia, about the idea of the yellow peril is based on the fact that the Asians almost did what the Europeans did. You know what I'm saying? Starting with Genghis Khan, he's basically saying the Europeans would have got overrun if that Khan didn't go back home to attend a funeral or some shit. And that's what influences their attitude towards like the Chinese and shit today.
Mhm. Hey, you right, bro. Hey, look, it's so crazy because, like, again, I hate to bring it back to IQ, but you have like a lot of white people that I've seen on panels. They really feel some type of way that Asians excel in certain areas like visual spatial skills and shit like that. So I mean, so he's making a comparing and contrasting of how they understood the power dynamic, and if one thing like with Genghis Khan that would have derailed their whole shit. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, he's basically that author is making an argument that I guess that the in terms of the warfare shit, the Asians was even superior to the
Yeah,
Europeans.
they
They
yeah they
could have
ran
took them
into a
out.
people. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
yeah.
that's basically what he's saying.
Hmm.
I'm saying I don't know a lot about Genghis Khan outside of just always just hearing his name through history, but I never took the time to really get into that. But I do know them motherfuckers was brutal as fuck.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
yeah, and they had the genetics to handle warfare. So yeah, him and his even his daughters were like built like crazy. So
In
yeah,
terms of like their like they we mean like morphologically, like their bone structure, that type of shit.
yeah, like physically, like their physical structure. The genetics from their dad aided them into being strong and being warriors and things like that. It was in his DNA. Actually, I did a video on it. Um, Let me see if I can pull up the slide. 1 second.
Oh yeah, the Mongol Empire. I think they had like the largest.
They did.
Yeah, they was getting to it out there, motherfucker.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yo,
Let me see if I
y'all
can
just
pull up
gonna
the
keep
slide.
going back until y'all get to like some Nephilium fallen angel bloodline crazy
What?
shit in a minute.
What the hell you talking about, Lottie?
Yeah, what are you
I
talking
mean,
about?
if the bloodline don't come from the fallen angels, then it's all human.
Man,
And
we
It
if
we
the
is
talking about
human.
humans
this.
come from Africa,
Who's
then the
telling you it's the
Africans would
fallen
have
angel?
whatever. Then the Africans would have whatever the white people would have.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, you talk about John Henry Clark argument.
I'm lost.
Yeah, the fuck. He said the
Uh,
Nephilim.
Well, I'm
Bringing up
trying to explain it
Nephilim,
again, right?
it's
Because
getting pseudo.
if it's a particular bloodline that will carry a particular behavioral trait that
Yeah,
a
but
different
his story
bloodline
got nothing
wouldn't,
to do with the Nephilim.
and that bloodline would have to come out of the human bloodline, which comes from Africa, right?
There's only
So
one.
whatever bloodline that has, it would be in Africa too,
You're not
is what I'm
understanding
saying.
very. You're not. Yeah, you're not
I'm
understanding.
I'm getting what you're saying about they go to an area, isolate themselves, and
Yeah.
different stuff. I get all of that. I
Uh-huh.
definitely get it. But I mean, at some point, you're not talking about a you're not talking about like an adaptation to survive. You're talking about just an unnecessary adaptation.
Nah,
Like if
we was talking about culture and gene evolution earlier and how it's a feedback loop and shit like that. So when you look at groups that was more isolated thousands of years ago and they created cultures from that, you can kind of see or get an idea of what kind of like methodologies they used to survive in that environment. And they created a spiritual system or whatever as a result of it. But I see what you're saying too. But I think we should embrace different ancestral groups and cultures and history to learn about the overall human story. But I embrace like me being an ancestral West African and not having any history shared with Egyptians or other Africans on the continent. I don't walk around and say, "Hey, I'm African," and because of that, uh, I'm related. I have a story that can mix in with Egyptians, Berbers. I'm not that type of guy. You know what I mean, I think you should embrace your distinct ancestors because other people do. Other groups of people walking around, you know what I mean? Like I said, the Asians and shit like that, they still following shit from Confucius. That's some shit ago. So it's like, I
I
get
think
the
what logic,
we're human argument. I get when niggas use the we are human argument, but we can't overuse that shit sometimes.
I think what logic basically saying is whatever brutality we could see exhibited in any group of people, us as Africans, we got it inside of us too. So we shouldn't walk around with any sort of moral feeling like we have any sort of moral
I agree with that.
superiority.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
right, because at some point in time, you have to be making an argument of these people are more or less human than we are.
Hmm.
Because if we're all human to the same degree, then the capability is the same.
Yeah.
Oh, don't,
But
don't,
culture,
don't
that's
you
why I say
call,
cultures and what they was exactly doing plays a
but
part in that. You know what I mean?
logic. I might have to call Pan African to help you out on that one, bro. If,
Well, if he ain't gonna do nothing but confuse me, man. That's why I don't even want to read what he reading. I might read that and actually start believing the stuff that James saying, but I gotta stay away from it.
hey, nah, logic. Because look, it's interesting that you say that because typically Europeans and Asians, right? Eurasians, they typically tend to have, a good deal more Neanderthal DNA than quote unquote African people. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, question:
So
can you respect that theory more now that you read it a little bit more? You can. It's like disagreeing with something, but the fact that he gave such, I guess, detailed, even though it may could be biased, the fact he's giving historical analysis through different lenses in different areas of the world. Even though I say he's wrong, I respect his putting forward a thesis at that time. Like I respect it more now, even though I disagree with it. So you still have the same pushback and same vigor after reading it, after hearing what Haskell read. Logic.
Um, it's more about like it's more about the intentional overreach, right? Like you will intentionally overreach when necessary for your cause, right? So it's very clear to me as to like where the road for academia stops with you. And I thought this whole thing was really about academia. So when I see an intentional overreach, like I can no longer like safely assume that what you're saying is true. Like so, like for me, is something there to where you're kind of shrouding your assumptions behind. I'm doing this for the greater good. Like for me, that's more of a problem for me. Like that's more of what I'm just speaking to when it comes to like why I don't. I think John Henry Clark can, right? He can go right there with Francis Cress Welsing. Whatever, you know what I'm saying. At least for me. Actually, I feel like both of them are dangerous at this. But for whatever conclusion, I feel like I gotta draw for Francis Cress Welsing. I gotta draw for him. He gotta be just as dangerous, whether that's what he was intending to do or not.
All right, so I think you'll find this part right here interesting, Logic, because he starts to go into the whole concept of race, right? So he says the dehumanization of the African people had already been started. The false images were already in motion. The stereotype and mental images of savage Africa and the dark continent were deeply impressed upon the minds of the Europeans. The distortions were repeated until some of the victims themselves began to believe them. In his book, Race, Science, and Humanity, published in 1963, Dr. Ashley Montagu refers to the belief in race as a widespread contemporary myth in the Western world. He further states that it is the modern form of the older belief in witchcraft. This point of view is extended in the following quote from the introduction to his book. And it says, I am convinced that when the intellectual history of our time comes to be written, the idea of race, both the popular and the taxonomic, will be viewed for what it is, a confused and dangerous idea which happened to fit the social requirements of a thoroughly exploitative period in the development of Western man. The idea of race was developed as a direct response to the exploitation of other peoples to provide both a pretext and a justification for the most unjustifiable conduct, the enslavement, murder, and degradation of millions of human beings. That's from that guy's book right there.
Well, so for me, it's like the the whole reason. So you have this underlying feeling about you think white people are inherently more violent because of something genetic. So you go about attempting to like, I guess, like prove your theory. You piggyback on some stuff other people saying, right? But that gets you mixed up in crazy arguments. Because I feel like you're the college professor. I want you to tell me like I don't want you to pretend to be an anthropologist if you're the college professor. The college professor is reading off of the page too. He's not making discoveries. You know what I'm saying? Like there's something like there's something in there like I don't want to make no excuse for it. Maybe that might just be me. You know what I'm saying? I
But
I,
Logic,
I
if you
see.
think,
I'm trying
if
to
you think
answer you.
about,
Like
no, go ahead. My bad.
I mean, you just go. I don't forgot what I was saying. Go ahead.
But no, I was gonna say, if you read that part of the book, the fact that John Henry Clark put that in the book, right, where this guy's basically saying the race concept was something of convenience, right? Western man is the
That's what I
term
was saying.
yeah. So that kind of goes against the idea of them being intrinsically or inherently, you know, kind of fucked up or whatever.
That's exactly what I was saying, right? I guess I wasn't speaking to that point fast enough, which I admit I probably wasn't getting there because I had to dress up the earlier conundrum first, right? Because uh, so if he don't believe it, right, then why himself use it to create this argument? Like in if anything, I like all of your other stuff should be consistent with that. So while on one hand you're going to be able to intellectually denounce it, but over here politically use it to do your thing, like that's misleading if anything. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know where you're at right there. You
Right,
give
right.
me the Haskell?
And now I feel you, but that's what I was gonna say. Let me keep going to see how he reconciles this, right? Because it seemed like it would kind of, if he buys into the whole genetic thing, which to my knowledge, I don't know if he does or not. I don't know if did he co-sign Chris Wilson and them? He probably did to some
Yeah,
degree.
he did. He endorsed it.
Right. So let's see where he goes with this, right? So he says European interest in formalizing the concept of race dates back to the early part of the 18th century. Dr. Montague maintains that the development of the idea of race may be traced with some justification back to the scholastic naturalization of Aristotle's doctrine of predictable genus, species, difference, property, and accident. In the year 1457, the Council of Cardinals met in Holland and sanctioned as a righteous and progressive idea the enslavement of Africans for the purpose of their conversion to Christianity and to be exploited in the labor market as chattel property. He further maintains that the concept of race had another development during the early days of the Age of Enlightenment, when in 1735, Swedish botanist Carolus Linnaeus took over the concept of class, species, and genus from the theologians to serve them as systematic tools. These conclusions show how important it is for us to deal with both the genesis and the present application of racism. This devilish scheme speedily became the standard policy of the church for 3 centuries, and thus the ghastly traffic in human misery was given a cloak of respectability and anointed with the oil of pontifical righteousness in Jesus' name. And so the slave trade began, inaugurating an era that stands out as the most gruesome and macabre example of man's disregard of the humanity of all men. There is no way to understand the African slave trade without understanding slavery as an institution. Slavery is almost as old as human societies. Every people has at some point or another been slaves. In fact, Europeans enslaved other Europeans for a much longer time than they enslaved Africans. This slavery did not give birth to racism, but it did lay the basis for feudalism. European racism had manifested itself in many dimensions outside of Europe. And what is called the Holocaust is just European racism turned inward towards itself within Europe, making Europeans the scapegoat of other European people. Slavery was a permanent feature in the ancient world. In Egypt, Kush, Greece, and Rome. So I'm gonna stop right there. So
Hey, Hackle. Now,
I don't
if
understand
I'm
your point no more.
let me say this.
I'm
Let me
not
say this
I'm
one
not
thing.
making a point, Logic. I'm going through John Henry Clark's forward. I'm not making a point. We just we
Ask
just going through it
before you
step by step.
read the book because most of y'all talking points is off. The ones that even critique John Henry Clark, y'all ultimate conclusion was right that it was wrong what he was saying, but y'all don't even understand his talking points. So the fact what he just read kind of gave more context to the argument. I wish more people was in here that was arguing about it a couple days ago could listen to what Haskell just read, but that kind of changes a lot as far as this alleged intent or what he was trying to get across that was sensationalized or like um used by people again who was saying that John Henry Clark was pseudo. So if I'm gonna defend Charles Murray for motherfuckers misinterpreting this shit, I gotta defend John Henry Clark too, even though I disagree. Niggas be misinterpreting his shit, obviously. So niggas gotta read his shit to get a
Well,
conclusion.
we not towards the end of the forward, so maybe he says all of that shit to come to some wild ending. You know what I'm saying? It's all
So far he's making like you know how we was talking about like slavery was everywhere. Like he's talking about that. What you just read,
yeah,
he's making that
yeah.
distinction. So keep going.
Because and that's the Logic's point, right? He pointed out that it was in Egypt, it was in Kush. You know what I'm saying? So he's not coming off as like he's just trying to paint the African as the moral superior and the European is just all just fucked up. There's a lot of nuance to it. And I think people like Brass, I don't know if Brass read the forward. If he didn't, I think he may be a little bit surprised that Henry Clark is given so much nuance. Because if most people heard how the conversation has been going on the panel for the
Right.
last few days,
Exactly.
you wouldn't think it would be so detailed and nuanced. You would just
Right.
think this nigga was just saying some wild, crazy shit.
Yeah, I still think he's wrong, but he's giving context and nuance. So y'all gonna have to make y'all gotta revise y'all argument after reading what or after understanding what Haskell just read. You got to. If not, you just biased.
Yeah, I'd like
But
to
let's
say too, I appreciate Haskell because you've been on your best behavior today, Haskell. I appreciate that, man. So, no, you got to give
oh
people their flowers, when
man.
they do.
Showing growth, man. You
Absolutely,
showing
absolutely. Hey, but I want to say though, because what you read there was kind of interesting, Haskell, in multiple different ways, right? Um, I'm always this guy too. I apologize. I just wanted just to suss this out. You know what I'm saying? Because it could be, and it sent me along while you was reading that, it kind of sent me along a path of thinking, right? And I think a lot. I think a lot of times, like she can initially be wrong. Like the reasons why it was initially done could be wrong, right? And even like the conclusions that you making from it can be wrong, right? Um, but like with the race thing, right? Uh, okay, fine. They was wrong for the initial reasons why they was doing it. I mean, trying to justify their conquest, around the globe. I guess is what I got out of it. Um, but just because they were wrong initially, does that mean that they weren't actually on to something? Like understanding the differences. You see what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right. Right. Two things can be true. Right.
that's what Fetty be saying.
Yeah.
That's
So just because they was ignorant, like it's a really tough conversation, and I'm not even the one to articulate it, but I just think sometimes because things were initially wrong don't mean that they always have. Remember the other day, Haskell. I think me and you had an agreement about something, but I don't know if it was you or it was somebody else. But what I was explaining is we agree, but we agree for different reasons. We don't agree for the
right.
same reason, right? You see what I'm saying? Like your reason was a different reason from mine. And I don't even think it was you, Haskell, but I think it
Nah,
was.
it
I was
was
saying
it
it was
wasn't.
somebody else.
I heard you
Yeah,
having a conversation on the thing. I was listening. It wasn't me, but I know the conversation you're talking about.
right. Like so, because let's use me as an example. Like I could have a reason for something as for nefarious reasons, right? Like my reasons can be for agreeing with you can be for nefarious reasons, but me and you have the same idea, but yours is for more of a humanitarian reason. You know what
Right.
I mean? So, like I said, like just because like I'm wrong, does that mean you wrong automatically, Haskell? Because you agree with me on this thing right here. You see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
It's
it,
it's a,
it's definitely it's a complex subject. It's very
it
very
is.
complex.
It's very complex and it's touchy and certain. I like this Discord because that would be just by me like asking that question would be offensive in another audience or circle or whatever you. Um,
Oh,
but I like it because we can actually talk about these things in a mature manner, and get to the bottom of it. You know what I'm saying? Because like that passage, I can't. You was reading. You need to read that one more time so I can get that out of there. Haskell, man.
All right,
I
so he
really
says,
want to tease that part out where they was being racist, and then they was doing their reasons were for the Christian Crusades or whatever. I believe that's what you were, because I was kind of listening and at work at the same time.
all right, so he says European interest in formalizing the concept of race dates back to the early part of the 18th century. Dr.
Mhm.
Montague maintains that the development of the idea of race may be traced with some justification back to the scholastic naturalization of Aristotle's doctrine of predictable genus, species, difference, property, and accident. I wonder what that's about. I kind of get the idea. He might have been on
He might have
some
been he might have been on some Darwin type shit a little bit.
way back then, right? That's kind of
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, he might have already been thinking. And they said like a lot of people had like Darwin, just the one who kind of like put it in good articulate way, But other people had already been kind of articulating this before him. But go ahead, keep reading, Haskell.
That's kind of interesting. So
That is that's an interesting part of that. Yeah, go ahead.
it says in the year 1457, the Council of Cardinals met in Holland and sanctioned as a righteous and progressive idea the enslavement of Africans for the purpose of their conversion to Christianity and to be exploited in the labor market as chattel property. He further maintains that the concept of race had another development during the early days of the Age of Enlightenment, when in 1735, Swedish botanist Carolus Linnaeus took over the concept of class, species, and genus from the theologians to serve them as systematic tools. These conclusions show how important it is for us to deal with both the genesis and the present application of racism. This devilish scheme speedily became the standard policy of the church for 3 centuries, and thus the ghastly traffic in human misery was given the cloak of respectability and anointed with the oil of pontifical righteousness in Jesus' name. And so the slave trade began, inaugurating an era that stands out as the most gruesome and macabre example of man's disregard of the humanity of all men. There is no way to understand the African slave trade without understanding slavery as an institution. Slavery is almost as old as human societies. Every people has at some point or another been slaves. In fact, Europeans enslaved other Europeans for a much longer time than they enslaved Africans. This slavery did not give birth to racism, but it did lay the basis for feudalism. That's dealing with the Slavs, right? That's what they did. European racism had manifested itself in many dimensions outside of Europe. And what is called the Holocaust is just European racism turned inward towards itself within Europe, making Europeans the scapegoat of other European people. Slavery was a permanent feature in the ancient world, in Egypt, Kush, Greece, and Rome. The African slave trade is better known to us because it is the most recent and best documented. The Christians of the Christians of European descent have never felt at ease in an honest discussion of this subject because every examination of it will prove that slavery and the slave trade were the incubator for present day racism.
Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with most of that. And I agree with most of what he said there. That was all John Henry Clark, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with in probably all of it, but at least 90% of it, I agree with most of it. Um, but so the Linnaeus guy, this was Darwin. Was this Darwin's cousin here? The Linnaeus guy,
Nah.
Carlos
Nah, he
Carlos
wasn't.
Linnaeus. Okay,
Yeah.
Nah, he's from Sweden. And
Okay,
he was
okay,
before Darwin. You
okay,
know,
okay, okay.
they give him the credit for being like the first person to really put human beings
In
into
racial
taxonomy.
categories, yeah. Taxon.
Right. Taxonomy. And see,
Yeah,
that's
that's
what see. So this is what I'm saying, right? Because I'm familiar with the name Linnaeus or whatever, and evolution and all of that, right? Him being tied to evolution, or whatever. But this is what I'm saying because he didn't have a good understanding. Uh, he came up with some bad conclusions, right? But I think he was still on to something, right? Can we at least say that? Like, okay, fine, his conclusions was terrible, and maybe he even has some nefarious reasons for his conclusions, right? Uh, but I think all in all, like we can still say, like I think he was on to something, right? Is it legal to say that,
Yeah.
or is that illegal?
Yo, the fact he brought up Plato, I just looked up a paper from Oxford and it said something dealing with the title's called Plato's Theory on Genetics. So
Yeah, he
that,
read that earlier. We was talking about that earlier.
yeah, I'm gonna
Haskell
read
had
that.
read that. Yeah. That was that was a good thing too. Like that was something interesting. You know what I'm saying?
I thought
Of
it was
course they're
building
not
blocks.
gonna have a understanding in the way that we have it, right? Like, oh, race is a social construct. But these people are and then this is another reason why I always bring up the bottlenecks, Fetty. You know what I'm saying?
Gotta bring up
Because
the bottlenecks, man.
I always bring the bottlenecks up because like that means something, bro. You understand what I'm saying? Like we,
it
we
does.
we just overlook things because white people their ignorance and that's what ignorance does. That's what racism is ignorance, right? Most of the time. Uh,
Yep.
uh
Yep.
I go listen when I go to a lot of these meetings. Sometimes them white folks in there ain't never seen me before. Now they didn't heard about me, right? But they ain't never seen me. They probably even done talked to me on the phone and corresponded with me in email. You know what I'm saying? And then they'll see me and be like, "Oh, you're Corey, right?" You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, there's I don't even know why I said that. I don't forgot why I even said that. It's fucked up. But but what I want to say is I think we can't pass over things because we're uncomfortable with ignorance. You know what I'm saying? Well, I mean, we should be uncomfortable with ignorance, right? But what I'm saying is we got to start somewhere, right? So the Human Genome Project got to start somewhere, don't it, Fetty?
Exactly, bro. And look, David. I'm sorry I don't want to cut you off, but David Reich, like it's multiple geneticists saying, bro, we have to come with the grasp, like the grasp. I meant that as time goes on and more samples goes in, we're going to see distinct, not distinct, but because everything overlaps. But we're going to see differences regarding frequencies within certain populations, talking about certain social shit that may be uncomfortable. And we, the people who understand the information, has to combat the races that we talking about that's going to use it for,
Right,
you know,
right.
like
Absolutely.
it's like integrity. Like when I know niggas don't like Razib Khan, but when Razib Khan talked about genes and IQ and shit like that, he was saying there's a time when people like Aristotle had this like integrity dealing with science to where like they would never let anything social trump or override a truth that science has proven. You know what I'm saying? And he's saying that more people now, especially lay people like us, we need to have that same integrity because we're again, bro, we're already transitioning to a society that's going to only highlight and make these genetic differences even more. You know how the rich get richer? The rich is going to be able to selectively choose embryos based off certain shit they find desirable. So it's important to use this information in a responsible way and combat it, because the gaps we talk about
Yeah,
will only get worse.
I like the first part you said. I really don't care about the rich people using embryos. Let them do what they do. But because we don't
Yeah,
know, we don't necessarily know the pros and cons to that, right?
yeah.
But I like the first part that you talked about. So those of and you said those of us, but I'm not included. I'm a concrete guy, right?
No lay people,
But
no common people who just talk about it.
right, okay,
Yeah,
I,
when
I
y'all
hear
talking
I
about
hear I hear
selecting
what you're saying.
embryos,
Remember, I
nigga, they
brought up,
just
hey,
No,
Corey,
no,
Corey. Remember, I
but
brought up,
those of us who actually got the inform who understand things do need to combat that racism. You know what
yeah.
I'm saying? Like
Remember
that's
the
our
concept I told you,
responsibility.
genome
But go ahead.
blindness, a couple of weeks ago? Remember we was talking about genome? I think it was like 2 months ago. We was talking about how
Yeah,
like
you talked about genome blindness, how
yeah,
people don't
it's
understand.
these right. It's these three categories under this new society that we're about to be in, where genetics will, go into social policy. You can have three approaches: genome blindness, meaning turn a blind eye to it, and possibly not negating a problem that you could have fixed if more people were to talk about it. The second option is
Yeah,
uh,
neglecting issue that we could probably fix. Because I do think there's some mental issues that we could probably fix in society. But go ahead, and it
yeah,
ain't
for
got
yeah,
nothing
sure.
to
they
do with
just
race.
Not
they
nothing to
It
just
ain't
do with
got nothing
race.
to do with race. Yeah.
they just extracted the Down syndrome whatever chromosome or whatever that was. Like they getting that far with the shit. You know what I'm saying?
And this is why I
Right.
say we can use good rhetoric, because those people in the civil rights movement, that
They
the
extracted
talking
the
point was,
glitch from.
hey, we're resilient people. That was the talking point before a Human Genome Project came out. We prided ourselves on being resilient. Turns out that there's new genetic articles showing that there's a genetic component to African Americans being resilient, being able to cope, and from a disease perspective. So I mean, like you say, at certain times
The
you
middle
can say
passage.
you can
Yeah,
say something, and,
Hmm.
and 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 the science ain't there, and it can sound pseudo. But again, us being
Right.
resilient, it seems as if the more that they look
I
into
mean, you
our
can find
genome,
mutations in
yeah,
populations that
they